Hi, this is Robbyn Peters Bennett. I'm with StopSpanking.org, and StopSpanking.org is a wonderful online resource for parents who are looking for nonviolent ways to parent and to discipline without using physical punishment. I'm also the board member on the U.S. Alliance to End the Hitting of Children, which is an organization seeking to end all domestic violence, including the hitting of children. And we have a great conversation ready for you today. I'm really, really so pleased to have these wonderful people here. We're going to talk about shelter and care and how do we parent in this new environment that's incredibly stressful. And so I've invited today several people just to help support us so that we can feel a little bit more comfortable with how uncomfortable we feel, I think, basically. We have today with us Dr. Bruce Perry, and I just want to tell you a little bit about him. He is the Senior Fellow of the Child Trauma Academy. He is the adjunct professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the Feinberg School of Medicine with Northwestern University in Chicago, and I think that is where he actually studied medicine. He's the author of, you may have heard of the book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, which is a best-selling book on the work of maltreated children. He's also published Born for Love, Why Empathy is Essential and Endangered. Dr. Perry is he studied both neuroscience and clinical research. He's published over 500 journal articles, book chapters, scientific proceedings. He is a wonderful advocate for maltreated children and their families. He has been on really every media channel, major media channel there is, including having been able to talk to Oprah about adverse childhood experiences, which was a wonderful series. He also has created this amazing metric that helps clinicians and parents better understand the neurological needs of their children that are traumatized, to move beyond just trying to change behavior, but to deeply understand behavioral and to understand that trauma is akin to really a physiological change in the brain that we can support in various ways. And when you begin to think about children that way, you begin to understand that behavior is a communication and it's a place to begin to understand. So it's just an incredible pleasure to have him here today. I've also invited some wonderful parenting experts, all of whom have either podcasts or Facebook pages where parents can get live, immediate connection and support. So not just information, but also community. I have with me Amy Bryant, who is the founder of Parenting Beyond Punishment. She is a psychotherapist out of Atlanta, Georgia. She has a wonderful online group that supports parents to move beyond operant conditioning and to find ways to use connection as a way to help children feel better and do better. She, I think, did 5 years in a row the No Spank Challenge, which is support to help parents find better alternatives to make parenting more pleasurable, frankly, and to help children feel better. So it's great to have you here, Amy. I also have here Trina Greene Brown. She is the creator of Parenting for Liberation, a virtual platform that has blogs and podcasts that aim to connect, inspire, and uplift Black parents. She's an activist and also a mother of two. She's also the member of the Resonance Network and the Move to End Violence. With the ethos rooted in community and collaboration, she cultivates cross-organizational partnerships aimed at building an inclusive gender and racial justice movement. She was recently named the 2017 Black Feminist Rising by the Black Women's Blueprint and the Inspirational Parent by Cadre. She has contributed to On Parenting with the Washington Post, which is wonderful, and also 2 anthologies on the intersection of motherhood and activism. And it's so interesting, Trina, because I would consider all these 3 ladies mothers and activists. I myself am a grandmother and an activist. So thanks for being here today, Trina. Leslie Hillenbrand is a first-generation Chicana mother with 3 biracial children. She was a early childhood teacher and behavioral coach. She has worked with children and families for over 12 years. She's a parenting coach and an educator. She has a dual degree in child development and family studies, as well as family life education. And she is the founder of Latinx Parenting, which is a wonderful online resource for parents. It's a bilingual organization organization rooted in social justice for Latina families and children's rights. And it's really all about nonviolence and connecting with community and moving toward wellness in our next generation. So thank you everyone for being here. And I think I just want to start the conversation by saying I'm aware that Amy and Trina and Leslie, you are talking to parents every single day with this shelter in place. Oh gosh. And are just kind of wondering what's emerging. What are parents talking about? What do they need? Where should we start this conversation today?
I will say that I'm seeing a lot of parents taking this in stride, which is really, really rewarding. And we're getting a lot of people reaching out saying that they're really struggling. So I feel like I haven't necessarily seen one or the other more than the other. But I myself am a mother of 3 children, and Dr. Perry, when you did your initial meeting a couple weeks ago, and you were talking about, how you can't imagine being a mother and being by yourself with 3 children, a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and an older child, I was like, that's me. And I was sharing with the ladies, I said, I could totally tell you what that's like. The mornings are really great, and then by evenings, I'm done. But for the most part, I think our community has been, I think they're really, we're really taking in stride. I feel very privileged to be able to be of support to them right now. And at the same time, those of us who are working with parents are trying to really be realistic about what our capacity is to serve and to be there for them, because we also have our family's needs, and it's just a lot of changes all around. And I think that that's the case probably for a lot of people out there that are trying to just, continue and go about their days. But there's this elephant in the room, and that can create stress for us. So, yeah.
So I wonder, when you talk about parents complaining, one of the things and struggling is that one of the things I was hearing about was that their kids are anxious, or even sometimes they complain that they're lazy and irritable, and it's hard to get them moving with the schoolwork and all of that. And Dr. Perry, I guess it's depending on the community, but there seems to be a lot of pressure for some parents to fulfill the requirements of the schools, and I just wonder if you could sort of speak to sort of what Leslie is talking about.
I think, Leslie, your comment about you sort of see these kind of a bimodal response. Some people are really mobilized and energized and organized, and they are reaching out and helping people, and other folks are starting to feel overwhelmed. And I can, I can guarantee that because of the duration of this experience, that we're just at the beginning of this, that even the most together person is going to start to feel frazzled. And I think one of the key things that we have to do is push back to the schools. And in the beginning, the schools were all about, most of them were all about, here's the curricular content that we go through, you do it.
Right.
And I know a lot of parents were like, oh my God, you sent me to like 5 different websites, and I got to watch this videotape and now get download this thing. And if I don't have a printer, it's like, it was really adding a lot of additional stress to already sort of distressed parents. So we've seen schools back off a little bit. A lot of school districts are just saying, listen, these are recommended, these are some resources, we're going to have a few Zoom meetings. But it took a couple of weeks for some schools to get to that point. And I think a lot of parents just got so overwhelmed. But I think that the longer this goes on, I think almost every school district in the U.S. is basically going to end up being forced to say, this is going to be a do-over. We're just, for the next 2 months, there will be no meaningful functional school. We're not going to come back to school. We're just going to be happy if some of our teachers don't die. I mean, that I hate to say it, but that's kind of where we're going to get in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, Dr. Perry, because I felt that level of overwhelm initially, where they're telling you download this app and and do the, you know, I'm familiar with Zoom, but I'm not familiar with like Google Hangouts, and they're moving towards that. And so there's all these little technical pieces, and I'm very privileged in that I have the education and I have the ability to really, you know, figure out what it means to download something, right? Just as simple as that. And I keep thinking about myself as an 8-year-old, which is the age of my older daughter. And I just think I cannot imagine my mother, right, this immigrant Mexican woman, trying to figure this out for me as an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And I know that there's people out there, I know that there's parents out there that are not familiar with computers. You know, you tell them, oh, just check out a Chromebook from your district, and they're like, I've never heard that word. And so much compassion and empathy goes to those parents. And I really am hoping that districts are understanding of that and are continuing to have meetings around what the realistic capacity is, especially for some of, you know, some of the areas that may be the majority of parents.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also very savvy, technologically. This is the medium that we use all the time when we teach. We teach all over the world using this. And the instructions I got from the school about what I should do, I'm like, what the hell? I mean, they were like, you know, I've never used Google Hangouts either. And then one teacher was using Google Hangouts, another one does Zoom, another one, you know, and it really, it's, you know, it's sort of like organizing a very complex meeting for content that's, you know, it's not that much stuff, really. So I do think that we're all going to have to learn how to take the foot off the gas pedal, both at work, where expectations about work, expectations about, you know, a lot of things that we normally had held ourselves to a pretty high standard about what we do in the household, what we do at work, what we do at school. I think a big part of this is for all of us to kind of adjust to, this is going to be a different kind of experience. And if we can settle into being with each other and kind of helping each other feel safe, have some fun, I think that will be a lot better than sort of worrying about whether or not their worksheets are getting done.
Yeah, this is Trina. It was really helpful to hear you just invite folks to slow down and kind of ease into being home. And what I'm hearing a lot of folks say is, you know, they're working from home now, so they're telecommuting from work. They're also supposed to be like a homeschool parent, and that's very new for folks. Working from home is very new for many folks. But their job still has the same level of expectations that they're supposed to be productive for those 8 hours, to be on a computer for 8 hours when they have children, and they have to be teaching and also parenting and also cooking and preparing meals and also working. So there's just a lot of stress and overwhelm because of this continued vision of like productivity, right? And so folks are like, I don't have the privilege to not produce because they're afraid of like, well, what happens if my supervisor or director emails me or expects a response and I'm not there because I'm taking care of my child. And so I really do think like it's a paradigm shift, not only for us as parents, but also just the workforce has to shift. And so it's not only talking to parents about what they can do, but like how can parents engage with their like employers or folks who are still having these high standards and demands on them.
Yeah, you know, Trina, it's interesting because I've been hearing more and more issues with both in the healthcare industry, but a lot of the other industries, like if you work at a grocery store or a pharmacy or some of these other places, the expectation has actually risen for your time and productivity as opposed to eased up. And a lot of these folks, they don't know where their kids are going to go during the day. They're going to get fired if they don't show up. You know, there's no childcare organized. I mean, we have a lot of these logistic problems that leave many families in really perilous situations. And I'm really worried about that.
I'm worried about that. I'm hearing, I'm seeing less challenges in the children around me than in the parents. And I find myself really just trying to normalize how uncomfortable it is and how some days are good or some hours are good. And then some days or some hours or several days in a row are so dysregulating. They feel angry and confused and scared. One of the stories I keep hearing again is moms who go to the grocery store and burst into tears because suddenly they don't have to be stalwart and stoic around their children anymore. And then looking at the grocery store and how stark and empty it is, even if there's groceries, just the lack of bustle, and how they just suddenly feel their weight, and the weight of, I'm going to be upset now, and the weight of it all. And so just really normalizing that this is a hard time and that this is the normal for now. And just because things get hard and we cry on a video doesn't mean that things aren't also going to have times of being okay. I think that's one of the reasons why we want to be here is what can we do to normalize this? How can we support parents and how parents support their children in real hands-on way that addresses their neurobiological needs? How can we help them know how to look for ways to be regulated and look for signs of stress in their children so they know how to move in with their children? And like you had said earlier, to be fun and to really embrace the need for safety in our homes. And I would normally add, and in our communities, but right now our community is our home. Right?
You know, one of the things that I think, I mean, again, we do this all the time, you know, maybe not on this scale, but we're very familiar with what happens to families or communities where there's been some sort of large scale traumatic event. And the number one thing that people don't appreciate is how exhausting it is to activate your stress response in a nonstop way. So even though, you know, you're going to feel ups and downs, what's happening is it's ups and downs, but it's gradually getting more and more and more. And that wears out your body. So people are going to find their ability to kind of, like in the morning, they're going to realize, wow, I slept for 8 hours, but I am exhausted. And they're going to find that they're a little bit shorter with people and including their kids. And their kids are feeling the same thing. So they're going to they're not going to be as compliant, and they're going to be a little bit more irritable, and they're going to have a harder time falling asleep at night, and all kinds of things that are indicators of this sort of rising stress activation. And here's the dilemma, and it goes to your point, Amy, is that the major kind of regulator for everybody's day in and day out stress is the connectedness that you have with other people. So, you know, you talk to a friend, you'd run into a neighbor at the grocery store, you sit on the front porch and people walk by and you talk, you know, those are physiologically meaningful interactions that make you feel better. They give you a little bit of pleasure and they make you feel like you belong, like you're connected, and that's regulating. But now, because of this distancing phenomenon, we're not seeing the same faces, and we're not seeing them in the same way. And so I would even imagine that one of the things that happens to people that break down in the grocery store is that they're finally out in an environment where they would normally get a little bit of this relational buffer, and there's nobody there. And not only is there no toilet paper and no bread, there's no people for me to kind of get recharged with. And I think that what we have to do is intentionally go out of our way to kind of reach out to people using the methods that we do have, you know, whether it's phone or text or, you know, FaceTime, those of us that are privileged to have access to that kind of stuff. Even a little 5-minute call to somebody is a tiny little dose of regulation. And I think we need to be much more intentional about that. But again, here's the challenge of being a parent, is that the inertia of taking care of kids over the course of a day, you can go for and realize after an hour and a half, you haven't talked to anybody except your kids for an hour and a half. And during that time, none of your needs have been met. You've just been meeting their needs. And so what I recommend is that people literally schedule reach out moments, that no matter what, every 45 minutes, you talk to somebody for 5 minutes, whether it's a friend, a family member, somebody outside, and that intentional, proactive, tiny dose of contact is going to be helpful. it's not gonna meet all of your needs, but it's gonna help you from continuing to escalate and feeling completely dysregulated.
Do you think that even a text could be, I mean, I know that for me text is helpful, but do you think that that meets that way of regulating a little bit?
A little bit. You know, one of the things about a human interaction, a human in-person interaction, is that there's the, you know, there's the physical feeling of a hug, and there's a smell. You may not even be consciously aware of it, but there's a whole different way in which the nonverbal cues around communication come from things other than words. You know, when you look at communication, it's about 7 to 8% the words, and all the rest of it is tone of voice, nonverbal cues. And so when you're using Zoom, it helps a little bit. I can see facial expressions, I can see sort of mirroring of movements, but there's some sensory part of it that's not there. And a text is the same thing. The words are kind of nice. It's nice to hear, you know, just thinking about you. That's a nice little dose. It feels good to think that somebody out there is thinking about you. But it's not as quenching, though, as a little 5-minute thing on Zoom where you smile at somebody and you know, you play a little April Fool's joke on your grandparent or whatever. You know, you get your kids to do something like that. That's these little connecting moments, even though they're brief, they're physiologically meaningful and they're helpful.
You know, one thing it makes me think about, you know, in Portland, people always complain that people aren't friendly. And I would say they're even less friendly now, you know, with the social distancing. But because I work with people that are traumatized, what I found is that a lot of times people don't notice your face when they're distressed. They watch my hands, you know. And so I have found that when I'm walking down the street, I'll wave at people and I can get a response that way, in a way that I can't just by even vocalizing and saying hello. Sometimes they'll just ignore me or smiling. They don't smile back. But if I wave my hand, almost everyone will wave back. And it feels good. The other thing I was thinking about too was that online I had a teacher telling me that she is calling parents and children just to say, hi, I care about you, and no emphasis whatsoever on curriculum. That her outreach right now is just to say, hi, I was thinking about you. And I thought, now if teachers were able to feel like they had permission to let go of the curriculum and just do that kind of social engagement, that could be their agenda.
Yeah. There's a principal that we know, his name's Matt Portell, and there are many other principals I'm sure that are doing this, but when this happened and they sort of shifted to homeschooling, he sent a letter out and said, forget about the academics. He said, make your kids feel safe, have fun with them, play games, do Legos. And then he's been calling every single family every week in his school. And it's just exactly, Robbyn, like you're saying, that little 5-minute, how you guys doing? Is there anything you need? You know, if you need somebody to come help you with groceries or whatever, we have a group of people that can do this. That's just what we need right now. We don't need to learn the quadratic equation. I'm actually a scientist and I don't think I've ever used the quadratic equation. So I'd much rather have my math teacher call me and ask how I'm doing.
That's great.
You know, that makes me think also about how that same way that schools are reaching out, that the way that the community's showing up and making connections. So there's folks who are offering to like host a play date for your kids. So the aunties and the family, friends who are just like, I'll get on Zoom and entertain your kid for 30 minutes. I'll read them a story, or, you know, have your kids FaceTime with my kids and we'll have this like family FaceTime our play date virtually. And so I've also seen that as a way because, you know, I know that we as the adults need connections outside of our children. I also know that the children are missing like connection. Like my son is so sad that he can't go outside and play. And our neighbors, you know, he's in a home where he's like the only child. And so, but he can see our neighbors, like there's 4 kids in the family. So they literally have a whole crew of people to play with. And he's like, you know, it's not fair that they can still go outside and play tag with each other. And, you know, it's just like also helping kids, you know, how can we help kids understand like why they can't go outside? And also how can we support them? Like, how do we regulate them and help them seek connection in times when it's limited?
I think on that point so important, because I think it's much harder, and it will be much harder with kids over time. we have a developed cortex, we have our brains pretty mature. We can think about the implications of our behavior about the future and the past. And, even though we don't like it, we can understand the rationale for what's happening. When you're 7 and 8 and it just, it doesn't sink in the same way. And I think the younger the child is, the more it feels like completely ununderstandable. And I think you're absolutely right about this. This will be one of the biggest challenges for parents is helping their kids understand this, and then figuring out replacement activities that will engage them. And this is where I actually have been really, this may not be that popular with some people, but I've said, listen, this is the time not to worry about screen time. The whole screen time limits and recommendations that any family might have, you got to throw those out the window. If the only moment you as a parent can get a break to take a shower is when you put your kids in front of a TV to watch cartoons, let them watch cartoons. I mean, they're not going to blow up because they watch cartoons. So I think, again, obviously you're going to want to, you can structure it in ways so that it's something that is a useful tool for you, or you could make sure that the content that you focus on is, you can watch nature shows on YouTube, or you can, there's literally a lot of fascinating stuff that you can do. But the reality is a lot of parents are going to have to be crazy creative, pulling their kids into cooking with them, having their kids, let's learn how to Zumba together. Let's, things that you would like normally, you might do a little bit of, you're just going to have to pull your kids into your life in a way that you never have before. And
can you talk about, like,
but it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and the screen time, just being able to give permission, particularly coming from you, is going to come as a great relief for a lot of parents because, the messaging has always been not to be on screens much. Can you give some advice about how to help children get off screens? Because what happens with a lot of the kids we're, working with is that once they're on, they kind of get latched on, and then when they get off, they're super grouchy, and it ends up in an explosion or like a big fight. And so, what can you help us understand a better, like, how to manage that a little bit?
Well, that's all different depending on the age of the child, right?
Right.
So, but the whole idea is transition. You're basically asking the child to transition, and so a lot of parents have sort of gotten used to the idea that if I tell my child to do something, they should do it, which is like fantasy world, right? So what you need to do is, if a child, before you go to screen time, you have an agreement that you both understand that this is going to be 30 minutes. And at 10 minutes to go, I'm going to give you a warning. And at 5 minutes to go, I'm going to give you a warning. And then when the buzzer goes off, then we're going to do something else specific. And the easiest way to help them transition is that you're going to do something with them. You're not just going to say, stop watching TV. You're going to say, when the buzzer goes off, you and I are going to go do our exercises, or we're going to go do Legos. We're going to go do whatever. So what you're doing is the transition from watching screen time, which is compelling and positive for them, they like it, is not to something that's unknown and boring and not to do. It's something else that's kind of fun. And kids, if you make it an activity that's with you, it's relational, it's motoric, pattern, repetitive, rhythmic stuff, then it will also be regulating. So as they get dysregulated and pissed off because they can't watch TV, you'll regulate them by, now we're going to do our exercises we're going to turn on the YouTube thing about, the gym teacher who's teaching us the activities that we should be doing together. So that's the key. The key is create mutual expectations up front, have a series of transitional reminders, and then transition to something that's equally pleasurable. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way we do it. It's
equally pleasurable, like, we're going to go make chocolate chip cookies now.
Yeah, I mean, but you have Parents underestimate how much pleasure how much kids want to be with you.
That's so true.
So if you are really with them, I mean, if you view this next activity as a pain in the ass, they're going to feel that. But if they view it as, hey, my mom wants to exercise with me, they love that. The truth is, in the end, they like being with you and having your attention more than anything else in the world, including screen time.
That's
I
awesome.
want to add to that. What about the parents who are like, I cannot upregulate enough to do this transition with them? What are some
Explain,
ways
I
to
don't
help?
explain what you mean
So,
by
like,
that.
let's say the 30-minute timer comes up and the parent is like, I don't even have the energy to say, time to turn it off. Let's go make cookies. Like,
Well, I don't think you have to go make cookies, but you know,
right.
there's a lot of things you can say. Hey, we're gonna take a 5-minute walk.
Okay.
We're gonna do anything. But if you are, as a parent, so overwhelmed and tired out that that's happening, that you can't, then you need to reach out and ask for help from somewhere, wherever you get it.
Yeah.
Whether it's your partner, whether it's somebody else, because that's an indicator that you're tapped out.
Yeah.
And when a caregiver is tapped out, then you have to figure out how to at least maintain where they are, because a tapped out parent in the face of ongoing parenting responsibilities is going to get more tapped out and more tapped out.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, I think that that's going to happen with a lot of our families, particularly marginalized, under-resourced families who are, have been impacted by all kinds of other sort of structural racism issues in our society. They've been marginalized already. They're operating right on the margin of unraveling as it is. And now this is just going to be devastating for a lot of those families.
I think I want to speak really briefly on something that you said earlier, and we've all kind of been talking about it, in that, the perspective that we have in general of children, right, especially some of us that are trying to work from home or be at home and work, is that they're disrupting us, that they're bothersome. And so these like childish perspectives could very easily become really exacerbated by the situation. And the conversations that I've been having, at least with some people in the Black and Indigenous people of color communities, is that this actually is a really good opportunity for us to reroute back into some of those practices of really honoring children, of bringing them in, as you said, of including them. And so I'm trying to choose to see that possibility and see that potential of saying, you know what, my ancestors actually were really good at this. My ancestors only had so many people in their village or in their group. And we can do this, right? Like, we can do this because historically we have been able to do this, and we can be creative. And so I feel like there's an empowering piece to it too. And so that's really hopeful for me, is that opportunity.
And Leslie, I couldn't agree with you more about that. I think that's something that that's what I kind of meant when I said at the beginning, we kind of have to settle into this and just this is a new way of us being together. And ironically, it's actually the original way of us being together as families. Babies and kids and elderly, we were always with each other in much more close physical proximity while we did all of our everyday activities. And a huge part of education was children doing things with their older siblings and with their parents and with their uncles and aunties, and sort of modeling and seeing and learning in parallel. And I think that this is an opportunity, like you say, Leslie, to sort of think about it that way. Now, with that said, here's one of the things that I think I run into all the time. First of all, I'm a privileged white guy with gray hair. And so whenever I talk about parenting or about everything, people have no idea what my experience with parenting is. They have no idea if I parent kids or not right currently, which I do. But when somebody who feels stressed hears somebody like me, or even somebody like you, saying, oh, this is an opportunity, that feels shitty. because you're almost undoing their emotional expression of distress. And so part of the dilemma we have is that when we listen to families that are struggling, we need to listen to that and give them the space to legitimately talk about their fears, their concerns, their challenges, and not undo it by saying, hey, you just have to do this easy transition from off screen time. And there, I can just hear people, I can just imagine what some people are listening when they hear me say this and go, you stupid shit. You don't have any idea what my life is like.
Yeah.
Who are you to tell me how to do stuff? So I'm always very, this is such a challenging dilemma that all of us who are being sort of held up as experts, suggestions we make, for some people, they may go, that is helpful. And some people are going to go, that is insulting.
Yeah.
I think we always have to sort of make sure that whenever we serve up these, recommendations, that we do it in a way that's kind of humble and in a way that's qualified and acknowledging that, listen, this may not be right for your situation. Anyway, I just felt that I think it's important to say that because it's, again, I can talk about this experience. I've got a house, I've got enough food, I've got a job. There are people that are losing their jobs. There are people that have no money to pay their rent. There are people that have a sick relative who they can't see, who may die. And they're also at the same time having to manage kids that are confused about why they can't go out and play. I mean, the number of challenges some people are facing is almost beyond comprehension. And I think that we have to kind of acknowledge that. And, that there's no number of podcasts that we do that's going to undo that. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate you acknowledging the privilege, right? And I feel like we're on kind of a spectrum where sometimes we can really step into that, oh, this is an opportunity for me. It's like right after my coffee in the morning. And then by the end of the night, I'm back in like, oh my gosh, this is too much, right? And so I feel like helping parents to understand that both are okay, like both are acceptable, both are normal right now, right? Like we can be happy and acknowledge our privileges and be grateful. And we can say, this is really fucking hard right now.
Yeah.
So.
And I think in the end, the thing that will help us get through all of this is just being as kind and connected as we can be with other people. Listen to what they have to say, do what little we can. Sometimes it might be a comment of advice. Sometimes it might just be listening. But I think whatever anybody hears out of this, I hope that they carry away that we need to intentionally reach out and connect with others and use whatever technologies and resources we have to do that. Because in the end, that's what will help us get through this.
Trina, I was wondering if you could say something to Dr. Perry about your discussion of trauma and the specific way in which trauma is affecting the African American community. And you had listed quite a few things. And I just think in service to like giving voice to that, if there's a way you could maybe talk about that.
Yeah, I'm really appreciative of you acknowledging the multiple layers that folks are experiencing at different levels. And when I think about the African American community, Black community, how this situation is exacerbating already existing conditions that are impacting communities based on, racism and institutional oppression and things of that nature, right? Like you mentioned, folks who are losing their jobs, right, because of employment inequity, folks who are struggling to pay their rent because of housing crisis, right? And so when I think about statistics and I think about who's being impacted at extreme rates, really holding the African American community. And when you talked about the tapped out parent, I was like, yes, the tapped out parent are those who are already dealing with those multiple issues, who are already dealing with that before coronavirus, right? And then it's just increased. We may be living paycheck to paycheck. So those are the kind of existing conditions, but also thinking about historical traumas and our own childhood traumas and how they're being exacerbated are being triggered right now. So things that I've been hearing, as an example, parents who may be in their childhood who experienced food insecurity, for example. And then right now to go into the grocery store and not to see bread or not to see things, right? Like how that is triggering things that are beyond just this moment, but it's like re-triggering moments from their own childhood or even ancestrally. And also when I think about like, this is a medical scare, thinking about, you know, in the African-American community, like having a lot of distrust of medical institutions who have exploited and experimented on Black bodies in this country. And so there's just a lot of trauma that we're moving through. And so just really thinking about those parents and what are the tools and resources for them to not be flooded right now.
You know, and I've had a lot of the families that we work with are in that situation, and they're struggling. You know, then there's, like I said, there's no amount of sort of the 10 tips to get through this that will change that. I mean, this is something that is going to illustrate and magnify the income inequities in our society. It's going to magnify racism in our society. It's going to magnify the issues around domestic violence, child abuse, all of the fractures and faults in our current society are going to be magnified by this experience. And of course, as you all know, the people who are most disenfranchised and at the bottom of the power differential will be the ones that will be disproportionately impacted by all of this. And, you know, I really little tips to sort of change that, but there aren't. I mean, this really means that what we really need to do, those of us who are in positions of influence, have to take these experiences and use it as fuel to change these systems, because this is just, it's going to be a heartbreaking, catastrophic experience for many families. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, it just reminds me of a grounding quote that Parents for Liberation often utilizes by Audre Lorde, which is that we must teach our kids, as we're raising Black children in the United States, we must love and resist, right? And so we love on our children, we connect with our children, we love up on each other, but we also have to resist and dismantle these systems that have not been made to serve us, that have left us out, left us disenfranchised. So there's a lot of beautiful activism that's happening. There's a lot of mutual aid that's happening, just folks showing up in solidarity to support each other, to research each other. So that's also really inspiring. But I think the system is starting to make the shifts right now. It's starting to provide like no evictions. It's starting to provide, leave. And it's starting to provide those resources that people have long fought for and resisted the structure. So it's similar, like it's a both and, right? Holding that, things are changing and things are being amplified. The fractures are being amplified, and also the activism is also being amplified right now.
And it's interesting, Trina, that a lot of these things that are happening, you kind of wonder, why did we keep people that were in jail on, pot things anyway? There's no reason we needed to keep those people in jail anyway. There was no reason that we needed to evict people anyway. So if we can do it under these circumstances, we need to be able to be that kind of understanding and have that policy and practice when we're not under crisis. Because right. As you say, a lot of these are things that are disproportionately impacting the disenfranchised populations, mostly people of color. I feel like I've been talking too much. You guys talk amongst yourselves. I've got allergies.
I just got all riled up, like, yes. Like when I think about us saying that, like a lot of folks are like, oh, normal is no longer is existing, and oh my gosh, everything's different. And like Leslie said, like this is also an opportunity, right, for a new normal where folks aren't evicted, where folks do have access to, where folks do have paid family leave, where folks, do have the resources they need. Like that's the paradigm shift that we need, so that parents do feel resourced and do feel supported. that they don't feel overwhelmed. It's like, what are the institutional shifts that are happening? So you got me all riled up and excited. So
that makes me happy to have you inspired. I feel like we talk a lot about how to support parents, and yet really I think in some ways all along we've been saying, okay, it's for many parents this is an unsustainable experience, and we're just mirroring that it's bad. But that what's different now is that it's not just about saying, it's really hard. It's really hard, but also, maybe actually we can feel each other and recognize that we influence each other, and if you're not well, I'm not well, and that potentially we'll start to see, that, oh, this actually isn't just an ideal, it's a real thing. Like even here, just walking out and smelling the air that actually is cleaner and I can feel it. Or just the fact that I can walk down the middle of the street now and not be run over by cars because there's not so many of them. And you can have this whole other experience of being in your body in the neighborhood and not just inundated by pollution and sound. But with parents as well, just for them to know that, I'm not sure I feel very articulate. I was just so moved by what you said. Really very moved by it. Yeah.
I think that's the silence, right? I think that we're all just kind of taking it in and really feeling into the breath of this moment.
Well, I'll talk. So, one of the things that I'm curious about is what have each of you found to be helpful in your families in this process? So what little things have you guys done that you found helpful? Because as you can imagine, I get asked to sort of give advice all the time, which is kind of silly. Sometimes I don't make up stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that people ask me about that I don't have much experience on. So I always want to try to learn from the people I'm talking with. So what has helped each of you in your families as you've gone through this?
I can speak to that. I think we're still trying to figure that out. Honestly, I think something that's really helped is getting outside. I swore up and down also that I would never get the Facebook Messenger Kids app for my daughter. And lo and behold, she's texting me right now from it saying, hi, Mom. And so I think that, just surrendering a little bit, allowing for some of those things that I would think I wouldn't do otherwise. Something that's been kind of challenging has been getting on the same page with my partner about what we're choosing to let go. And so I also am mindful of that maybe being a struggle for some people. And so it's been helpful to have conversations in the evening after they go to bed about how we're going to approach, some of these limits and what limits we're going to let go of mutually. So I think, that ongoing communication, and I think you're right. I think the dosing, that micro dosing of making sure that I'm connected throughout the day, either via text. I can't always, FaceTime or Zoom people, but I think even just the knowing that I am able to has been really helpful. So yeah, I think it's like a meta, like, oh, I have the tools and I can use the tools if I want to and when I need to. So yeah, I think getting outside, just making sure I'm on the same page with my partner, and then being able to be connected has been really helpful for us.
We are in a learning curve, I think. And so what worked last week or the week before is not quote unquote working right now. And I think it has a lot to do with my stress going up and my partner's stress and my child's stress. But for sure, I'm lucky. My child's 11, so I can go for a walk by myself for like an hour. And that is amazing, not gonna lie. I do try to talk and text with friends, which is super helpful. And then when I am not the mom I want to be, I really focus on that rupture and repair process, and going back in and saying, I blew it and I'm stressed and this is what I wish I had done or what I wish I had said. And then there's hugs and laughs and, you know, just really focusing on that relationship and having space for her to be heard. And then, yeah, checking in with my partner and going, well, that didn't work. Help, you know, and just really saying, this is too much for me right now. And just being open about it and letting my child see, like, I have to reach out for support to you. And I'm not going to do this perfectly. And then I'm going to come make up with you. So I think that's probably, and then my kid gets to go ride her bike because there's nobody on the streets, which is so fantastic. So that's been helpful for her. So.
What's been working for us is what folks did a few minutes ago, which is pausing and returning to breath. And so doing a lot of breath work and like noticing sounds, right? Like, Amy, I think you have birds chirping in your backyard, and I can hear that. It's like maybe before I wouldn't have heard that, right? So just like slowing down, being taken in our environment, and returning to breath, like being grounded by inhaling, exhaling, slowing down. And then the other thing with my child is following their lead. Trying to get them to do things that you want them to do makes a definite struggle. But if you're like, what are we doing today for breakfast? What are we doing today for our outdoor activity? What are we doing today for, you know, really following their lead? And also just getting in touch with my own inner child. It's like, well, what would my 11-year-old self want to do right now? You know, and how do I give my inner child space to like play and to have joy, and to relax and to not read all those emails and watch the news. And so just having my inner child meet my child where they are. And so like we play computer games and compete with each other on the Wii dance, and, you know, just really just lean into that.
Nice. You know, one of the things that you said, Trina, that I think is so important for everybody is that if people have some predictability, even if it's going to be stressful, if it's a known thing, it's much more manageable. So in the morning, if there's a schedule, like if you say, you kind of go through, what are we going to do today? What can we expect? That actually is very helpful for folks. And you know, everything that all you guys talked about, I think are sort of the keys to what we've found are helpful, taking unpredictable, sort of chaotic stress and making it more predictable, moderate, and manageable. And that's the key. Predictable, moderate, manageable stress leads to resilience. Unpredictable, prolonged, uncontrollable stress leads to vulnerability. And so this is, in some ways, if you can bring elements of predictability, moderation, and controllability to the experience, you'll have a chance to sort of buffer and then maybe even build a little resilience. And I think that this, again, the things that can do that are, you know, if you can moderate the stress by regulating yourself using either reaching out and connecting with people or taking a walk or dancing, all of those things are regulatory. And that's, I think, over time, the more we learn how to do all of these things in a more predictable way and avoid the predictably escalating stuff like watching the news that's predictably escalating, the more we'll be able to figure out how to manage day by day. But it's going to be a challenge. But I definitely think it's, you know, we'll get through this. Just like, you know, we all of us, in both individually and as families, we've all gotten through tough stuff already. So
I want to say something just as a grandmother, because I think some of the listeners here may be grandparents that are a bit separated from their family. And I would say for me, of course, my morning walk is huge for me, but I will also say, like, and this may happen to other families. My daughter's an adult, but I think she contracted the COVID and she was profoundly sick, but she's out of state, far away from me. And what really helped me through that was just to have FaceTime on and just to have her face and just to be doing nothing, or I'm cooking, but she's there. I'm amazed how helpful that was at reducing my anxiety and just being able to read her and feel her. And my grandchildren the same. They'll just do, you know, a little WhatsApp and, you know, just that facial stuff. Just, and it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be doing anything.
I'm aware that Dr. Perry needs to leave.
I do. I've got a homeschooling Zoom session that starts in like 1 minute. So
You got to get going. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
I really
guys.
appreciate this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was great to have a chance to talk to Dr. Perry, and I really appreciate the time we're spending. And I just wanted to give us a minute to just take in everything we've been talking about. I personally am quite moved by it. Just the vision of the changing that's happening, and that we're in this together, and that there's these huge shifts that are happening, and potential for greater compassion, more humane policies, more equity, justice, love for our families, more support for families, which is my deepest desire. So that's what I'm holding. Is there anything you ladies would like to say?
I'm just really glad we were able to get together and to talk. I feel really appreciative of the space that we've been in here together, and really grateful for whoever's watching this. We do need support, and I want to normalize that this is hard, and that reaching out for support in whatever way you can find it's what we all need. So thank you, each of y'all who are here and whoever is watching.
Thank you, Amy. I resonate with that profound feeling of gratitude for all of you and for Dr. Perry, and you know, and I think we're kind of modeling how to hold each other through this, and you know, and there's no expectation that we're going to get this right. I think that that's very freeing to me to know that it's, you know, and that's what I would want to share with parents, is that it's okay to not get it right, right? Like it's okay to mess up. And I love what you said earlier, Amy, just about focusing on the repair process. I've been having to repair a lot more frequently because there have been a lot more ruptures by nature of my children being around that much more often. And so, yeah, just giving ourselves that grace, right? And that permission to heal when we need to was really big for me, and I hope it is for others.
Yeah, I was going to close with grace and gratitude. Inviting parents, offering parents grace for themselves to get it wrong, to mess up, to try it again. Grace with themselves and grace for their children, that we're all just trying to get by right now. And also a return to knowing, you know, ancestrally, that our ancestors have survived chattel slavery, Holocaust, immigration, wars. We survived things, and that I appreciate that this moment is an opportunity for us to survive this all together as a collective, the entire world. No borders, no racial, like we're all going through this. So just inviting us all to remember that we have everything we need when we look within and look through connection with other folks. So much love and gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you, Trina. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Leslie. All right. Well, we're going to put resources down in the body of the YouTube so that you know you're not alone. You can reach out to all the women here, and there's groups you can join, and we're here for each other. And so just know that that's there for you.
Thank you, Robbyn.
Thank you.